Look, let me just very quickly go through some of the things that we've been doing since I spoke to this forum last year, which really has been focusing on the findings of the review that we did of publicly accessible systems. So my role, or one of my roles, is what's called Government Chief Information Officer. And despite that title, the primary focus of the role is on really radically shifting the way government uses IT to deliver better, more efficient, more effective services to citizens. That's really what it boils down to. Information is clearly a really important component of that, but technology is too. And really the big context is, as we all know, in the digital era, New Zealanders need to be confident that the government can protect and keep secure their personal information. I really support Ian's contention that trust and transparency are actually quite different things. And it's quite a complex discussion to talk about trust. But in the end, New Zealanders do need to get to a position where they have confidence that they can trust government to look after their personal information appropriately. Now, I thought it was interesting when we looked at the findings of the latest survey that was released by John's office earlier this week. Now, New Zealanders do rank government agencies in our ability to handle their information as one of their top 5 privacy concerns, and that's no great surprise. But I think what was interesting is if you look at a little bit more of the detail, and I've had a quick look, not a comprehensive look, but on my reading, New Zealanders are actually more concerned about the way businesses handle their information. So whether you're in business or in government, handling personal information is an important strategic issue. And I think that's the key thing that we need to bear in mind. Many of us are, in our organisations, are information professionals or security or privacy professionals. I don't know how many of you sit at the executive table, but that's where this discussion has to take place, is at the executive table. We know we're in a dynamic environment. Technology is changing rapidly. The internet, this big thing that Ian talked about, is changing and has changed the very nature of service and the way we access services and information. And it's going to continue to do that. And I think we have to reach a point where we understand and accept that there will always be a level of risk with this. And the only way that we can eliminate risk in this space is to just lock everything down. That's clearly not an option. And as it is with manual processes in the technology space, it's about deciding how much effort and energy are we able to put into this to match the nature of the risk that we're managing. Let me talk a little bit, having said a bit of context, about the work that we've been doing over the last 12 months around information security and privacy. So after the breaches that the government experienced some time ago, we set up a steering group and a programme of work to make sure that we increase and improve government's ability to handle information. And just to recap, the findings of that particular review, the GCIO review, were pretty clearly, and talking at the collective level, collectively, agencies needed to get the issues of privacy and security further up the organisation. We found that a lot of the key decisions that were being taken were being taken at technical levels or at relatively low levels within the organisation. And we had to drive a behaviour change and a culture change to make sure that those issues were being raised to the right level. Broadly, that was one of the big findings. The other big finding was that the capability that was then needed to support an increase in security focus and privacy focus, that there was a broad rise required in the level of capability that government agencies had and had access to. So as I mentioned, we set up a senior level group of officials to drive a programme of work. The Privacy Commissioner has been attending as an ex officio member, and that's been really helpful to have Marie along for the early part, and now John has also joined, and that's really useful to have the Privacy Commissioner there as an observer. So where we are today is that we've been getting regular reporting through from agencies, and those reports have been going on to ministers because ministers are very, very interested in seeing those levels increase. We've seen a clear shift in the understanding amongst agencies that accountability for privacy and security must be held at a senior level. So as an example, we now have 98% of the agencies that are in scope, and that's 70 government agencies, are reporting that accountability now sits at the senior level. That contrasts with the findings in late 2012 that 21% of agencies were reporting that it sat at a senior level. So that's a big move. The second big area where we've seen a change in this respect is that, again, 98% of agencies have a Chief Information Security Officer or have a clearly designated IT security manager. And that's a movement from 50% of those agencies in 2012. So again, quite significant inroads into the accountability issue, which I think is really encouraging. Now, equally, we've seen a lot of clear increases in the various types of capability that are needed within an agency or for an agency to access to enable to lift their game. And I won't go into the details of those because there's quite a number of different areas. But we've seen lifts across all of the aspects that the review covered, including things like accreditation and certification. We've also set much clearer expectations on agencies. One of the early pieces of feedback from the review was that agencies were not clear as to which piece of advice, which piece of guidance, or which mandate they should be following. So we've been working really hard to clarify all of that so that everybody's clear what the requirements are. So, for example, we've issued, and in fact this was done by Stats New Zealand, some really good work done by Stats. We've issued a privacy leadership toolkit, and we've had a lot of really positive feedback from agencies on how useful they've found that. We've established an IT security services panel. It's an open panel whereby successful organisations who get onto that panel have to demonstrate clear capability and a demonstrated track record in the area of providing IT security services. Makes it so much easier for agencies to access the capability that they need. They don't have to go through a procurement process. They know that anybody in that panel has reached a certain standard. And again, agencies are feeding back that they're finding that very useful. For the sake of time, I'll skip on now to another important change that Cabinet agreed was required, and that's the establishment of a role called the Government Chief Privacy Officer. This new role is part of the overall plan to help agencies lift their capability and sustain the improvements that we've seen already. This is a long-term game. There's no question that these improvements have to continue. And so establishing some permanence around the structures is quite important. So the Government Chief Privacy Officer has been established and will lead an all-of-government approach to privacy and provide both sector-wide leadership and the right advice and guidance to agencies. So agencies will have somebody that they can come to help them when they look to implement new standards in this area. And I'm pleased to say that we've actually announced an appointment to this role. Russell Bernard is a very experienced public service manager, and Russell will be joining us in July to take up his position, and Russell's here today. In the meantime, we have somebody acting in the role, establishing the office and making sure that we continue to make progress. So just to summarise, as we transform government services to meet the needs of citizens and make them more in line with the sort of services that you're experiencing with your private sector customers, private sector service providers, agencies simply must follow best practice approaches. We have to get better at, and we are getting better at, the business of managing security and privacy issues within agencies. Agencies have to continue to keep these issues top of mind and on the executive table, because they recognise and understand that privacy breaches carry real-life consequences. So we have to keep going. We can't be complacent, and that's why we're establishing these more formalised structures to make sure that this is an ongoing process of change. These sorts of changes are always a marathon; they're not a sprint. We've worked very hard over the last year. The programme of work has a further year to go, but by the time we get to the end of that programme, we will have established very clear accountabilities and a very clear ongoing programme. The last thing I'd like to say is just to pick up a point that was probably covered earlier by Miriam on the Data Futures Forum. This whole area of information and information sharing, I think, is a vital area for public debate. And it's a discussion that we have to have, and as Ian alluded to, it's a discussion that we have to have in a very reasoned and mature way. And the work of the Data Futures Forum, I think, creates an opportunity for us to have that public debate. The forum's reporting at the end of June. There's a series of discussion documents, and they are traversing all of the important issues, and I would encourage people to take a look at those and get involved in the debate. Thank you.